Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we take a look back at the events of a day, the historic context in which those events took place, the historic ramifications of those events, and we also take a look at some people that were born on that day and some people that died on that day. As always, if you have not yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification icon to be alerted anytime I post new content. And tell a friend. And now, without any further ado, this day in history, April the 3rd. And on this day, in 1948, President Harry Truman signed the Marshall Plan, which authorized $12 billion in aid for 16 countries in Western Europe. The plan's goals were to rebuild the war-torn countries, remove trade barriers, modernize industry, and improve European prosperity, and prevent the spread of communism. This plan was ambitious and successful. It helped Western European countries prosper in the years immediately following the war, when many of them were ravaged by war and just decimated. You had huge swaths of Europe that were just huge, like craters of destruction. And the United States, who on the home front had largely been spared direct damage, said, "We are going to take money and allocate it toward the rebuilding of Western Europe. Because when we bring in these ideals and these new ways of perspective, it's going to prevent the spread of communism into Western Europe." And it was successful. In Western Europe, communist parties saw massive drops in support. It saw their political influence in these countries dissipate tremendously. Not to say that these countries didn't elect left-wing and progressive and even socialist governments. They certainly did. I mean, the British Labour Party is a socialist party. And you had socialist parties that took control in France and in Germany. But it prevented the spread of the main enemy, communism. And that's the big thing that it did. And it was an ambitious plan. And it cost these countries nothing. Not a red cent. They didn't have to pay it back. We fed the masses. We built the infrastructure for them. We helped these countries recover. And because of it, it put a bulwark in Western Europe against communism and helped lay the foundation for the post-war order. And unfortunately, we are seeing today that ideal of European prosperity, the breaking, down of trade barriers, the cooperation of the European nations crumble. And it is very distressing and going to have devastating consequences in the future. And that brings in my second topic, births on this day. On this day in 1930, Helmut Kohl was born in Ludwigshafen in Germany. Mr. Kohl was the Chancellor of West Germany from 1982 to 1990 and the reunified Germany from 1990 to 1998. He was the leader of the CDU, which is the center-right party in Germany, from 1973 until 1989. He held a PhD in history. Kohl was a strong advocate of strong European integration, French and German cooperation, and a steadfast ally of the United States and President Reagan. President George H.W. Bush and Clinton, upon Kohl's death, called Kohl the greatest European leader of the second half of the 20th century. And Kohl was able to take Germany after years of being divided. From the end of World War II until 1990, it was divided east-west. The Free West and the Communist East. And in no place was that more in view in the city of Berlin. You had the free Western Berlin and the Communist East. And it was separated at the Brandenburg Gate by the wall. That horrible dividing line between freedom and communism, erected by the communists because they had to keep their people in. It wasn't to keep the West Germans out of East Germany. It was to keep them in, the East Germans in. And no one would. And Kohl was able, after the wall fell, to take that fractured country that had seen so much upheaval from World War I through World War II, the dividing of Germany to the reunification of Germany, and make it work. Sadly, some of Mr. Kohl's retirement, though, has been shadowed in controversy. There was a scandal involving CDU finances and some shady dealing. And after Mr. Kohl's first marriage ended in him becoming a widower, he married this very controversial, much younger female. And he had suffered some brain damage, and she was seen as kind of controlling him. She made him very distant from his children. She even refused to let them pay their respects to him in his dying days. She refused to have him buried next to their mother and his first wife of 47 years in Berlin, and next to his parents, and have a service in Berlin. And because of this, they did not attend the funeral of their father. She is very supportive of some far right parties in Germany, and just seen as a lightning rod of controversy. But many people consider him one of the greatest leaders of Europe in the post-war. As I said, Bush and Clinton credit him as the greatest leader in the post-war Europe. And he certainly is a figure that was a leader in the fight against communism, and was one of those driving forces as communism fell, was looking how to bring about the world after the Soviet Union falls. So, a great man. Some deaths on this day. In 2015, at the age of 73, in Alexandria, Virginia, Sarah Brady died. The other day, on the anniversary of President Reagan's attempted assassination, I talked about James Brady and how he was severely wounded and permanently disabled from that assassination attempt. One of the things that came out of that was that he and his wife became strong, passionate advocates for gun control legislation in this country. Probably in the second half of the 20th century, from the 1980s onward till their deaths in the early 21st century, he and his wife fought for meaningful gun control legislation, in particular in relation to handguns. The Brady Bill, although it has been repealed, the assault weapons ban, getting caught killing bullets off the streets for a time. These are things that they fought for. From the year 2000 until her death, Mrs. Brady was named the chairperson of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. It was a lobbying group that they had partnered with that later took the name of the Brady Campaign. It was hugely successful, as I said, organization for some time, although after its early successes, the NRA was able to come in with their muscle and money and has for years now defeated any meaningful gun control legislation that this country has tried to pass. And this was quite the striking swing for Mrs. Brady and her husband. Obviously, Mr. Brady worked for a Republican administration and a Republican president. She had spent time on Capitol Hill working in the offices of Republican members of Congress and for a time worked as a coordinator of field services for the Republican National Committee. She was also, for a short time, a public school teacher. When at the time of Mrs. Brady's death, her husband had died the previous year at the same age. So they obviously were two very people that were very much in love, as I said. And in her book, that she wrote in 2002, she talked about some of the struggles she overcame. She talked about her struggles, with her husband's injury and disability that he suffered. Her son had some pretty significant, serious medical problems of his own, and her own battles with her addiction to smoking cigarettes and her battle with lung cancer. Mrs. Brady would die of pneumonia at her death. But her book has been really lauded for putting her fight in a new light, and showing that if you're determined, you can change history. I will see you all tomorrow. Y'all stay safe out there.